Welcome to the Sheridan Report, brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Make sure you go to MyBookie.ag by going through the GruelyTruth.net website, clicking on the banner at the top of the page. You get $1,000 cash bonus. I am your co-host for the show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I would like to welcome my other co-host, Bobby Sheridan. How you doing, Bobby?
Hey, Mike, we're doing good. And we went over this. You're the host. I'm just your guest on the show every day. That's the way I look at it. Bobby. You're the man, Mike.
Jeez.
Oh, man.
If I wanted to fight about this, I'd just have Risley on the show with me.
Hey, good interview this morning. I love listening to you guys interview Steve Alford, and that was really, really, really enjoyable. And let's hope we can make our show more enjoyable than it's been the last couple of days, because we've had a little streak here where things haven't been easy, and that's kind of the, I think people expect, when they think about sports betting and things like that, and even the stock market, I mean, you expect there to be some lulls, and they're going to happen, and when they do, it's like they don't feel very good, but you got to keep the right mindset. We've had about a stretch of maybe 9 days where we've only had maybe 2 or 3 winning days out of those 9, and it gets difficult, Mike, but you stay focused, you keep your confidence up, and next thing you know, you'll have about 12 out of 13 that you've won, and it's in the rearview mirror. And that's kind of the way we look at it, and that's kind of why I've always told people, with a small amount of money, you can come in and go for the kill in a day and take your shot, and it doesn't work maybe, or it works. But the way to do this long term is to have a bankroll, to play off of your bankroll, and whether these days where things aren't going well, and then when they turn around and they go well, then you're okay. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're hoping things turn for us today. And let's start in the MLB, Mike. Is that okay?
Fine with me.
We'll do MLB, and we've got the MLB. It's a little bit of a shortened, I don't want to say shortened schedule, but not as much depth to this card. But we still found a couple straight plays, and we found a 3-team parlay that we put together, and it's going to come down to this morning. There's 2 major games that we've already missed. We've got the Royals was a top play, and they're down 2-1 early in that game, and the Mets were the first leg of a parlay, and they're down 1-0 early. So we're hoping those turn around. But here's what we got left. We've still got 2/3 of that 3-team parlay left, and that's Cleveland at 3:00 with Trevor Bauer. And the Angels tonight, their home opener with Harvey. Harvey's going to be their most consistent. Harvey and Cahill are going to give them a chance to win some games this year. The rest of their, when they get Skaggs and Haney healthy, they might have a decent rotation there. But those are the 2 guys now, and they're coming home, and hopefully they can get their bats going. They really struggled swinging the bat on the road, and I think that they'll come home and have a good opportunity tonight. So we've got Cleveland and the Angels to end off that parlay. And what you could do is you could throw the Reds in. The Reds are a straight play tonight for me at 4:00 Pacific. They're small underdog on the road over the Pirates, and I really like them tonight. They were my second best play on the card. So we've got the Reds. We can kind of, with Cleveland and the Angels, tie a 3-teamer together, and I think that could be a good bet. And then obviously do a straight bet on the Reds. That's what we got left on the baseball, Mike.
All right, Bobby. Let's go. You want to go college basketball first, or you want to go NBA?
Let's go NBA first and finish it off with college basketball. There's 2 straight plays I like on the card. The NBA's got a real short schedule tonight, but there's a game that kind of stood out to me. 2 non-playoff teams are playing, and you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers going to Sacramento, and the line I had on the overnight was 1.5, and I'm going to pull it up real quick. It should just take 1 second. I want to get an updated line for the fans.
9.5 on my bookie.
Is that what you got? Okay, so 9.5 is the updated line, and I'm pulling it up on mine too, so it stays 9.5. And this is going to be a tough game for Sacramento to cover. I'll tell you why. They've had a string of games against some solid teams, and they've gotten into a mode of kind of hanging tough with the good teams and covering a lot of those games and winning a few of them. And earlier on, they were making a playoff push, and we kind of warned that, this is a younger team that is going to hit the wall, and they're not as they're not ready against the bottom of that playoff. The Clippers, the OKC, the San Antonio, and it's exactly what happens. What we said, they've now fallen out of that. But then they had a goal of maybe playing 500, and they're 2 games back of that. And I just think they're in this weird situation right now where they're like, okay, we're going to finish this out, and we hope next year's a better year, and we think we'll be ready to maybe push. And they've got 2 really good players, Fox and Hield. And this is a tough game because, it's the end of the year. Houston comes in the other night and blows them out by 25, and the energy wasn't there. And they're playing a team called the team in the Cleveland Cavaliers that, they've known their fate and where they've been along, for a long time.
Since LeBron left in free agency last year.
Yeah, and the thing is, what are they going to be able to put together? Well, they put together a poor season in terms of wins and losses, and we knew that, but it's about development this year. And, they've developed a few of their players really nicely, and I like how they use a full complement of players that will match Sacramento. Sacramento does the same thing, and they're getting really good scoring off the bench with Jordan Clarkson, among others, and they hang in there rebounding-wise with other teams, and it's going to come down to tonight a point guard matchup, 2 of the best in the NBA, Sexton for Cleveland and Fox for Sacramento. And I really believe this is going to be one of those games where neither side gets away from the other and it stays competitive all the way through. I think Cleveland's going to have a chance in the fourth quarter in this game. And I like the 9.5. I think it's one of those games where I don't think the 9.5 will ever be in question. I think Cleveland will be showing you throughout the whole game that they're going to be not blown out in this game. And so I like the Cavaliers' young squad. They played really well against Phoenix the other night. What I mean by that is it was hidden. They lost by maybe 14, but they were down and could have given up, and they didn't. They battled back and stayed in that game. That's the nature of how this team's finishing. Really together, really strong, with a lot of energy every night. So if they bring that tonight, that's what you're handicapping in this game. And if they bring that tonight, they will cover this line. So
all right,
I like Cleveland.
I got a listener question on Twitter, which you can ask us questions at Grueling Truth. The Milwaukee Bucks are a 5-point favorite tonight at Philadelphia. We have Bob from Scranton, Pennsylvania, that wants to know why the Sixers would be a 5-point home dog.
Well, I think in this situation, you've got to look at maybe kind of where they're at with their lineup. Embiid has not played for a few games now. He was supposed to play every other game, and then it came down to he was going to not play 3 games. And I just was not sure of the situation with their roster, how they were going to.
Well, my guess is at the Sixers +5 at home against the Bucks, probably neither one of those guys are playing.
Yeah, I'm going to think there's going to be, there's just too much guesswork for me in this game. And Philadelphia, is not playing very well right now. I think they're waiting for the playoffs to put together their A lineup on the court all at the same time. And I don't think it's happening in this game. And this game means nothing.
Yeah.
If you look at the standings, I mean, it's not a game you really would want to bet on tonight, because if you look at the standings, there's nothing to be gained by either club. The Milwaukee's pretty much got the first place lined up. Philadelphia's pretty much stuck in that 3 hole. They're going to play each other. They would play each other in the finals if they both won out. This is a game that's meaningless. I don't believe that Embiid will play in the game. And let's go back and look for him on Tuesday night was Monday night when the Sixers played. Okay, I'm trying to look up the stats right here. I don't see the Sixers on Monday. Maybe it was, not Tuesday. Oh yeah, the Sixers played yesterday against the Hawks on the road, and you've got no Embiid. Okay, you got Redick, Harris, Butler, Simmons, Bolden. So you've got no Embiid, Simmons, Harris, Butler. Okay, who are you missing? You got no Embiid in that lineup, and you've got. It seems like there's another player missing. I'm drawing a blank here, but I just think Embiid's the real deal. The question mark there. And then Milwaukee, how are they going to approach the game? They seem to win no matter what they play. They play Giannis, or they don't play him, or they sit Bledsoe out, they don't, or they win anyway. So I think if you had to you had to put a gun to my head, I would just lay the points with Milwaukee, but I couldn't get involved with this game.
All right. You got an NIT final tonight between Lipscomb and Texas. Who do you like in this one, Bobby?
Well, in this game tonight, Mike, I have a play, and this is the kind of situation where it's left me wondering, all right, Lipscomb, we've missed a couple opportunities with them. I know you touted them that they were a team that was slighted by the NCAA, should have made the tournament, and had we been on them, had we been we could have made a couple bucks in this tournament because they played well and they've gotten themselves to the finals. And myself, I waited because I wanted to see how they were going to react in the semifinals. They just beat Wichita State, and that was a big win for them. And they came back. Well, they were up. They won each half, but Wichita State in the second half developed a 10-point lead in that game, and Lipscomb really had to battle from behind, and they did. And Lipscomb's got a player named Matthews that is taking advantage of the 3-point. He shot 15 only shot 5 of 15, but he shot 15 3-pointers the other night, Mike, and against Wichita State, and I think he's the single most dominant player in the field because they look for him to shoot. He scored half of their points the other night, which I typically don't like, but Lipscomb has learned to play with him and learned how I just really like how they play. And I think the fact that they got past Wichita State and got to the finals, I think they're going to win it. And it's a matchup. They're going to go against this kid. What's his name? Wichita State has Texas got a player back, and they played really well with this player, Roach. With him in the lineup, they played really well. But I had a feeling that the semifinal, which was a matchup with TCU, it was a league, a conference matchup, conference rivalry. I had a feeling that game, Texas may have had a little bit more focus in than maybe they even do in this game. And I just like how Lipscomb came back and won that game. And here's something I want to bring up. Were you aware, Mike, that they widened the lane for this tournament in the NIT?
Yeah, they also changed the 3-point line. You go FIBA international rules.
Yeah, they went FIBA international rules, and I think that's really helped Lipscomb because they shoot the 3 ball, and they have this guy. He shoots NBA, from 3 ball from the NBA mark. He shoots way behind the line, and Texas, Lipscomb won shooting 34% the other day. If they shoot like they're capable, they're going to win this game, Mike. They won a game the other night, gutsy, coming back, not even playing near their best game, and they beat a team, Wichita State, that was the hottest team in the tournament. So, even though Texas has played the best competition and probably played the most talented team and beat them in Xavier, I think Texas is vulnerable tonight, and I think Lipscomb's going to have a big say in this game. So I like Lipscomb. I haven't made a bet on them the whole tournament, even though I've been aware of them, and I'm going to go ahead and make a bet tonight.
All right, Bobby, we got anything else, or do we want to go on this day?
I got something I wanted to mention with the Early Risers Club. We're back in action there. We've got the PGA at the Valero, Texas Open, and we had a winner already this morning. We had a matchup, Kuchar over Finau, and that was a winner. And we've got Fowler to win the tournament at 10-1, and he's gotten up to a great start. So be on the lookout for a few of the matchups coming up in the Early Risers, and the ATP will get back going next week. So I wanted to mention that. And then, of course, we got the Final Four coming up on Saturday. We have a really strong selection there. And baseball, I can only tell you, is our number one, and it's by far our best return of investment. And we're just getting started with that. So just relax and hang tight. And, our top players are still 6-5, in the first 11, even though we've struggled to put a whole card together. So we're going to be okay. Keep listening, keep believing, and that'll turn around. And again, let's come tonight. Cleveland Cavaliers, and I think you can put something together with the Reds and Cleveland and the Angels in the MLB.
All right. And the Mets aren't dead yet, are they?
Oh, no. Today's games are no. I mean, the Royals.
What is the
tied
score
Tigers.
right now in the Mets game?
It's 1-0. The Nationals are beating the Mets 1-0 in the fourth. Yeah, that leads off our three-teamer. I'm just saying it's not available anymore.
I
it's
know.
already gone.
I was just messing with you.
Yeah, yeah. But the Royals just tied the Tigers. So baseball, you get in a run, and it's a long run when we get into a good streak. And right now we're just trying to find our way through. And it's the start of the season, so no apologies. I don't like giving out losers. I mean, yesterday was Mike. I've been around the Grueling Truth Network now for maybe 3 months, and I think yesterday was the worst card I've ever given out on the air. And I don't think I've ever given out a bad card on the air. And yesterday we only had one winner. Out of about 6 or 7 things we liked, and I feel really bad about that. Anybody that knows me knows I feel really bad about that, and we just have to just put it in the past, and we're on to the next day. Win or lose, on to the next day in terms of your emotions and your discipline, your mindset.
All right, Bobby, real quick, we're going to hear a message from our sponsor, MyBookie.ag. We will be back right after this.
Hi, I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grueling Truth Sports Network, and I'm here with just one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money. The Grueling Truth has recently partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website, who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on, and that's why the Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag. In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now, and MyBookie will give you up to a free $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. Just enter promo code TGT50, that's TGT50, to take advantage of this offer. You can also go to thegruelingtruth.net, click the banner at the top of the page for MyBookie.ag, and also get the same benefit and the same $1,000 free cash bonus on your first deposit. So visit MyBookie.ag, courtesy of the Grueling Truth, and enjoy winning today. MyBookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, we're back. I'm Mike Goodpasser with Bobby Sheridan here on the Sheridan Report, brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Bobby, what do we got today?
Hey, Mike, I want to before we get to the On This Day, I want to further maybe just take 30 seconds on your callers, your Twitter, question.
Yeah.
We're back on that game. I'm kind of doing some research during the minute there. I looked at some things that I really wasn't able to look at, before. It looks like they're talking about Embiid will play tonight. He missed the road trip. He missed the 3 games in a row. And they're talking about him playing tonight in that game. And so, it's one of those things. I do want to make that clear, because it looks like he is going to play according to what I'm reading. And I think it's just, one of those things where Milwaukee is this will determine the season series, which won't have any bearing on playoffs, because Milwaukee will be the number 1 seed and won't have any bearing really on anything. I'm just trying to figure out, I think this Milwaukee is just that much better right now, where they're going to be a favorite really over anybody, no matter where they play, pretty much, it looks like to me. I think Philadelphia just hasn't done enough recently with their play to warrant being like a pick-em type situation. And I think there's just some question as to whether, as long as Antetokounmpo plays, I think they're favored in this spot. And it looks like he's playing too. So it's an interesting game, because you don't really know, I don't really know what they're playing for,
Yeah.
Motivational wise, you're kind of guessing too much in this game, I think. But I think Embiid is playing, it looks like.
All right, Bobby.
Anyways, I just wanted to give
day.
accurate information. Yeah, on this day, I wanted to get, just give accurate information for him. And on this day, Mike, we've got quite a few things that took place on this day, and there's a couple of them I want to bring up. We have to bring this up. 1974, this is the day that Hank Aaron tied Babe Ruth's home run record at 714. This was this day.
Yes, it was. And it happened in Cincinnati, close to where I live. And the interesting thing was, the great Reds announcer, Marty Brenneman, he replaced Al Michaels after the 1973 season, and the first game he called was this game where Hank Aaron hit 714. Did he hit it off Jack Billingham?
I think so, Mike.
I
Yeah,
think I
you're
remember
right.
it was Jack Bellingham, and then I think I remember they started off the season with like 7 or 8 road games, and I don't even think they let Aaron play after he got 7-14 because they were worried he would get it away from Atlanta, and of course,
Right.
eventually, like a week and a half later, he broke the record against Al Downing of the L.A. Dodgers. That's what I remember about that.
Right. I mean, that, gosh, that such a time right there in 1974. And, he's amazing. Correct me if I'm wrong, all-time home run leader, except for Bonds and things, but never led the league in home runs.
Yeah, and his batting average was well above 300 too, so he wasn't just a home run hitter.
Yeah, just a consistent machine, just unreal player. And
I
still
think he's
alive
one of the
and still
most
looking great.
underrated players in baseball history.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree.
And
So it's just, really that guy has just been something else, what he's gone through, and the color, being an African-American player, those color lines that they had then, and things he had to endure in the minor leagues and coming up to the big leagues. And as he approached Ruth's record, the great white, icon, and it's just, he's a special guy. He's a special guy.
The other thing that stood out to me was when you get to the end of his career, like Pete Rose hung on to break the record, but he pretty much sucked his last couple of years. I mean, Hank Aaron in 1973 hit 40 home runs. 1974 he hit 20. Then he dropped off and sucked. Hit 12 and 10 in his last 2 years with Milwaukee. But I just remember that I remember watching the 75 All-Star game. It was excited because I think they put Hank Aaron in that game, even though he didn't have the stats for it, just because it was getting towards the end of his career. People voted on him. But he was still, as of 1975, 22 years into his career, playing 137 games. Batting average had dipped to 234. But this is a guy that you're also looking at almost 2,300 RBIs, almost 7,000 total bases, a 305 lifetime batting average, a lifetime on base percentage of 374, a lifetime slugging percentage of 555. I mean, he was a phenomenal player, and he was just consistently great. And he went for, outside of the first year and the last 2 years of his career, in a 23-year career, he hit at least 20 home runs in every one of those years. And he was just a great baseball player. And when people talk great baseball players, they'll bring up Mays, Mantle, Aaron, or Ruth, all those guys. But Hank Aaron deserves to be up there right with them.
Right. No doubt. Well, Mike, we have another one I wanted to bring up to you. It was in 1988. And on this day, men's basketball championship, and I found about 4 of those on this day, but this is the one I wanted to ask you about.
Well, it has to be, because I can only do this for tournaments before 1991.
Well, all right. Well, you know what? We had 88 on here, and it was the 50th. This was the 50th NCAA men's basketball championship, and Kansas beat Oklahoma 83-79. This is the year after Indiana wins it. We just had Alfred on. You guys had him on. Next year was Kansas with Danny Manning, right?
Yeah, and Kansas had been dominated by Oklahoma twice earlier in the year. This was the third largest point spread that was ever overcome to win it all. I think 83 and 85 were the 2 biggest, and 88 was the third. When you look at the East Regional in 1988, you had one interesting thing. The number 1 seed was Mark Macon and John Chaney. I don't think Macon turned out to be what they thought he was going to be when he got to the NBA. But you had a couple massive upsets in this side in the first round. Number 1, you had the defending national champion Indiana Hoosiers lose 72-69 to Richmond, who was the 13th seed. Dick Tarrant was the head coach there. And Tarrant, I think, was at 91 when he coached Richmond as the 15 seed. Beat Syracuse, the 2 seed, which is the first time that had ever happened. And then Richmond goes and plays Georgia Tech, the 5 seed. Beats Georgia Tech, so they're in the Sweet 16. And you drop down. Missouri, who was a team that was used to having nice seeds and getting upset in a tournament. They lost to Xavier in '87. It was Xavier's first tournament win ever. They lost to Rhode Island 87-80. The interesting thing I remember about Rhode Island is they had a player. I think his name was Tom Garrick. You remember Tom Garrick, Bobby?
No, I don't.
Okay. Tom Garrick was a shooting guard. Great player. And the reason I remember this is after they upset Missouri, on Saturday of that day, the noon game, which the entire country got back then, was Rhode Island and Syracuse. Syracuse was the number 3 seed. They were a huge favorite in this game. And Garrick went off again, and Rhode Island won 97-94 in an absolutely classic basketball game. But the backstory on Garrick was his dad was at every one of his games, but his dad was blind. And I remember CBS showing his dad on the sideline, or not the sideline, but in the stands with, the dark glasses and the walker, and he had somebody basically telling him what was going on during the game. It was just a great story because the kid also was a great player. And Rhode Island had a hell of a basketball team. So you go to the Sweet 16 there. You had Richmond was a 13 seed. Rhode Island was an 11 seed. Now, Richmond got owned by Mark Macon and John Chaney and Temple. But Rhode Island damn near beat Duke. They lost 73-72 at the buzzer. Or I think Rhode Island would have been a Final Four team that year with Garrick. In the Elite Eight, Duke absolutely throttled Temple's Mark Macon on offense. I don't remember what he was, but I remember he was like 2 for 18 or something crazy. So Duke was going to the Final Four. In the Midwestern region, you had Purdue as the number 1 seed. But what do me and Risley always tell you about Purdue? In the end, they'll choke. And they did. They ended up choking in the Sweet 16. They lost to Kansas State, who had Mitch Richmond, who I know you being a big NBA fan, you remember Run TMC with the Golden State Warriors a few years later.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, so Kansas State made it to the Elite Eight. On the other side of the bracket, I think the team that was supposed to come out was Pittsburgh. And I'm not 100%, I don't know, but that might have been the team with Archie Miller, but I'm not sure. He might have been a few years later. But we had a huge upset here where the 14 seed Murray State upset Jim Valvano and NC State 78-75. And we've talked before about how upsets a lot of times control who the Cinderella is. This is a perfect example. Kansas was the 6th seed. They played the 11th seed Xavier. Xavier that year was like 27-5. They should have been better than 11 seed. And they let Kansas play in Omaha, which gives them a home court advantage. They beat Xavier 85-72. The second round, when you think they're going to play North Carolina State and they're going to be done, they're not, because Murray State upset North Carolina State. Now, Kansas damn near lost to Murray State. Kansas beats them 61-58. And on the bottom of the bracket, where Pittsburgh sits as the 2 seed, Pittsburgh gets upset by Vanderbilt 80-74. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think the main player for that Vanderbilt team was Scott Drought, who was from Scott County, Kentucky, and had a great high school career there, but for some reason didn't get recruited to UK or chose to go to Vanderbilt. So that sets Kansas up in the Sweet 16 as actually the better seed. They're the 6th seed. They play Vanderbilt, the 7th seed. Kansas beats them fairly easy, and that sets up Kansas State for, I think, a third match. And I think Kansas State had won the first 2, but by then, Danny Manning's on fire. Danny Manning beats Mitch Richmond in Kansas State. I think it was by like 10 or 12 points. And then we moved down to the southeastern region, which the number 1 seed was Oklahoma. And coming into this tournament, Oklahoma was the best team in the country. I mean, Oklahoma comes out in the first round. They beat UT Chattanooga 94-66. They beat Auburn, who I think had Chuck Person in 88. They beat them by 20. They beat Louisville by double digits. They beat Villanova by almost 20 points. But once again, here's where it helps. Villanova upset Kentucky. Kentucky was the 2 seed. Villanova upsets them. Villanova upset Illinois. So Villanova pulled 2 major upsets and played Oklahoma, and Oklahoma dominated them. So Oklahoma's beaten everybody by double digits. Arizona, this is the team that had Steve Kerr. I remember the crowd. Every time Kerr would hit a 3, everybody would repeat his name after the PA announcer, Steve Kerr. They had what they called like the fun bunch or something on the sideline where you had all the guys that act like general dumbasses when they were on a roll. The main player on this team was Sean Elliott, who was probably the best player in college basketball that year. But Arizona, much like Oklahoma, blew everybody out. So you had Arizona, they beat Cornell by 30 or 40. I think they beat Seton Hall by 30. They beat Iowa by 20. And then they blew out North Carolina by like 18 or 20 points. So that set up Arizona, Oklahoma, and it set up Kansas against Duke. Now, I think going into the national championship game, the thing that's interesting that I remember from this was this. Most people thought the winner of Oklahoma-Arizona was going to be the national champion. They had dominated everybody in the tournament, and they come out, and actually in the first half, Oklahoma dominated Arizona, and they led, I think they led by like 12 or 13 points. Sean Elliott played really well in the second half. I think he ended up with like 31 points. They got close a few times, but never could get over the hump, and Oklahoma beat him by like 7 or 8 points. Steve Kerr was the big thing here because Steve Kerr was your outside shooter. Elliott did his job with the 31 points, but when you look at Kerr, he was held for 2 for 13 shooting. He only had 6 points in the game, while for Oklahoma, you had, I don't know if you remember, I know you remember this name, Mookie Blaylock.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, Mookie was a hell of a point guard. He only had like 6 or 7 assists, only scored 7 points. But this game was a game that was dominated up front by Harvey Grant and Stacey King, and both of them were really good players. Of course, Harvey's brother Horace was probably even better than him. But on the other side in the semifinal, what we had was Duke and Seton Hall. I'm still stuck on yesterday. I don't know why, but I am. But
hey, and speaking of Mookie Blaylock, that guy could play some defense. I think he may be his all-time leading steals.
I think Gary Payton is.
Time.
He might have. Payton may have broke his record.
Right. I think you're right.
But yeah, I think that would have been. He might have. He was a hell of a basketball player. Who was the coach on that? It was Billy Tubbs, right?
Yeah, Billy Tubbs, I believe so. And, Mike, as you said that, who would be older, Blaylock or Payton? I think Payton might be older, no?
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to remember when Gary Payton was at Oregon State.
Payton was at Oregon State in like 89 or 90, so I think he might have been a year or two after.
Just a very, very close, right? Yeah, right around the same time.
Yeah,
huh?
just a little bit. But I think he was because I think Payton was playing at Oregon State. Yeah, I know he was because when Loyola Marymount was really good, 89 and 90, they played Oregon State twice, and I'm pretty sure that Payton played in those games, which were great games.
Yeah.
Because every Loyola Marymount game, if you liked offense, was a great game. But we had Duke and Kansas, and the thing I remember about that game was Duke's star was, I think it had Danny Ferry, and Danny Ferry had a rough game. I think he shot something like 7 for 25 from the field, scored 19 points, didn't get any help, though. It was only him, and I think Kevin Strickland scored 10. You had Quinn Snyder, who had an off day. Basically, Duke just didn't shoot the ball well. They turned the ball over like 16, 17 times, but their defense kept them in the game because Kansas turned the ball over like 20 or 21 times. So that kept them in it. But if I remember right, I think Kansas got off to a big lead, led by like 10 or 11 at the half. Duke would get it within like 4 or 5, get the ball, get stopped. And Kansas ends up upsetting them 66-59. And, I mean, what that brings us to is Kansas-Oklahoma, which is a game where most people thought Oklahoma was just going to run away from it. The interesting thing about this, and when we talked to Steve Alford on Survive and Advance today, he talked about the Indiana matchup in 1987 with UNLV and how Knight came in and told him everybody's going to think we're crazy, but we're just going to run with them. And most people coming into this Kansas-Oklahoma game thought that Kansas is going to try to slow the game down. And they didn't. I mean, they came out, and the score at halftime was 50-50. Alford, the year before, I think, set the record for the Final Four, hitting 7 threes in the championship game. There was a white kid by the name of Dave Seeger. I think it's Bob Seeger's son. It's not really. But Dave Seeger hit 7 threes and scored 22 points. Dave Seeger was the leading scorer for Oklahoma in the 88 championship game. Blaylock added 14, Grant 14, Stacey King 17, Ricky Grace 12. And the thing that struck me that I think made a huge difference in this game was the fact that 3 starters played the entire 40 minutes for Oklahoma. The other starter played 39, and the other starter played 34. Terrence Mullins was the only guy that come off the bench for Oklahoma. So I think that when you look at Oklahoma, I think they got wore out by Kansas because Kansas, they had a good starting lineup. You had Chris Piper, you had Milt Newton, who was a good player, Kevin Pritchard, Jeff Geldner, who could shoot the 3 a little bit. And then, of course, you had Danny Manning. But coming off the bench, I think they had like 4 guys that played 10 minutes or more, including Lincoln Minor, Keith Harris, Chris Normore, and Scooter Berry, who I know you've heard of. His dad was Rick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because I think Scooter scored 1 point on a free throw, and I remember they showed his dad more than they showed him in the game. But basically, Kansas held on at the end of the game. They got a little bit of distance in between them and Oklahoma. Oklahoma comes back on them. Kansas holds on and wins the game 83-79. Danny Manning ends up being the MVP. It goes down forever as Danny and the Miracles. I think that when you look at this, I think that Kansas beating Oklahoma, to me, this may sound nuts, but it's a bigger upset than NC State beating Villanova. Or NC State beating Houston, or Villanova beating Georgetown. And the reason I say that is this. NC State won the ACC tournament by beating North Carolina and Virginia. When you look at NC State that year, they had some wins against top 5 teams. When you look at Kansas, they got pretty much blown out and manhandled twice by Oklahoma. And Oklahoma was on a hot streak that I don't know that we've ever seen. I mean, they won until last year with Villanova, but I think they had the one game they won by 10 or 11 points. Everything else they won was by 20, 30, 40 points. So in the end, I think when you look at these teams, the way they matched up earlier in that year, and with Villanova beating Georgetown, that's a huge upset. But the thing people forget about Villanova-Georgetown is this. In 1985, in the regular season, they played twice. The first game was at Georgetown, and Georgetown won by like 6 or 8 points. The second game at the Palestra, Villanova's home court, it went to double overtime, and Georgetown won by 2. I think the Oklahoma-Kansas game, when I look at it, is a bigger upset just because of the way Kansas had so easily handled Oklahoma earlier in the season.
Right, yeah, in both times, right? I mean, it was...
Yeah, that and with Houston, you had glaring weakness. I mean, they had some great players, of course, but they didn't shoot free throws well. And they didn't run half-court offense well. And what happened was NC State slowed the game down. NC State made their free throws. And then they're fouling Houston when most people wouldn't even be fouling Houston with 4 or 5 minutes left. And Houston's just missing free throws all over the place.
Right, the game got all mucked up.
Yeah, it got all mucked up. That's a good word. And really, if you remember, the killer in the 83 championship game was, I think Houston got up like 4 or 6 points with like 7 minutes left and actually went to a 4-corner offense.
Right, you taught me that. I went back and looked at that game after you talked about that. Yeah, you said Guy Lewis went to that plan, and it backfired on him. Yeah,
it backfired because then Valvano just came out and fouled him. If they would have just kept running their offense, I think they'd have won the game by 10 or 12 points, but they didn't. They slowed the game down. They shortened the game. You don't want to shorten the game when you're the better team, especially when you are by that much the better team. And what they did, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I think his thought process was, didn't Drexler have 4 fouls?
Yes.
Played the whole second half with 4 fouls.
Yeah.
And so maybe, he was a little bit worried about fouling out, him fouling out.
But Guy Lewis has got to know his team can't shoot free throws, and eventually NC State's going to foul him. The genius of Valvano was he didn't wait till the last 2 minutes to foul. He fouled, if I remember right. You've watched the game more recently than me, so He started fouling with like 3-4 minutes
Right.
left.
Right. Exactly right. And, it brings the question to my mind about blowouts and teams that, let's take a look at this Final Four just for a second. We've got in those games, Texas Tech has won some pretty tight games. They've been a small underdog in a few, and they won some pretty tight games. Of those 4 teams this weekend, is there any of those teams been blowing the other teams out at all? The reason
Auburn blew out North Carolina.
Yeah, Auburn did blow out North Carolina. It just seems like these games we haven't really had that one team, have we? That is just, or 2 teams that have just blitzed their way.
Well, I think what you have is this. When you look at this, goes back to the one and done thing. If you look at the '83 Houston Cougars, I mean, you got NBA players all over. You got Clyde Drexler, you got Hakeem Olajuwon. They'd been in the Final Four the year before. You look at '85. You got Patrick Ewing. Hell, Ewing was in the championship game in '82, won it all in '84, and he's back in '85. That doesn't happen nowadays. I think that's why you don't get dominant teams. What you get in the Final Four nowadays are usually veteran teams that take advantage of the young teams, like Michigan State did to Duke. That's why you end up, or you don't really have a huge favorite, because a guy that's a first-round NBA draft pick, if he's in the NCAA tournament anymore, he's probably playing as a freshman, and that's not as dangerous. Patrick Ewing wasn't nearly as good a player in 1982 as he was in 1985.
Absolutely. That's such a good point, Mike. So it just brings everything so much tighter and more competitive in all these games.
Yeah, which gives you
look
better
at Texas
games,
Tech,
better tournament.
I just pulled it up. Texas Tech in their run here, 15 points.
And that was a close game. That was
Buffalo.
because I don't think they ever ran that out more than 15 against Northern Kentucky.
Right, it kind of ended that way. 20 points Buffalo, 19 Michigan. So they kind of look like that team.
Yeah, they
15,
did whoop some
20,
ass.
19.
All right.
And then Gonzaga by 6. Okay, now Michigan State has 10 points over Bradley, 20 over Minnesota, 17 over LSU, and then 1 point over Duke.
Yeah, so really both of them have been dominant. I think what you've got is the 2 teams that are playing the best are Texas Tech and Michigan State. I think you have, on the other side, I think you have the team that is probably the hottest in Auburn, because, I mean, they're banking threes in to win or to get shit done right now. And you've got a team in Virginia that has been consistently all year the best team. So I think the contrast there is great. So you got the hottest team. You got 2 teams that are playing the best, and the 4th team is the team that's been probably the best team for most of the year.
Right, but they're lucky to be where they're at. I mean, they got very lucky to win that Purdue game, and what that means, I don't know. They have a 15, 12, 4, and 5.
Yeah, but remember this: they almost got knocked out by a Purdue team that only had one guy scoring double digits, and that guy scored 42 points. And sometimes that happens. The thing that is impressive was, even though that guy scored 42, Guy and Jerome basically matched him with even more points and won the game. So the fact that they overcame somebody that was shooting like that, to me, is impressive, because usually when you face a guy that's hitting everything, it tends to make you press and you miss shots. But, I mean, Edwards would come down and hit a 30-foot three. Kyle Guy'd come down and do it. Edwards would do it again. Jerome would come down and do it. And, I mean, there's something to be said for a team that got completely humiliated last year and this year has a chance for redemption, and they've done that so far. I think they're a very dangerous team, because I think what makes Michigan State, Virginia, and Texas Tech so dangerous in this Final Four is you have to beat them. They won't beat themselves. And the thing that makes Auburn dangerous is, just like the North Carolina game, they could pop up and drop 18 threes on you with 3 different guys doing it.
Right, that could happen. It's less likely, but it could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why if I looked at this, I think Auburn is going to get blown out by Virginia. But if they have one of those nights, you never know. But they would be my least likely of all 4 of these teams to win it all. And when I look at it, I think the most likely to win it has to be Virginia. And then Texas Tech and Michigan State are sitting in there in the middle, just waiting for a chance. But
well, and one of them's going to have their chance because they're playing each other.
Yeah.
That's the game I'm really looking forward to. And we'll talk more about this, as the week goes. But, we're talking Final Four, and we're just bringing it up to speed now. And, Mike, thank you for that. 1988, Kansas, the Mannings, the Miracle Mannings. And, it was just such a great year. And you're right, Oklahoma was the best team, but they didn't win it. And there's so many special teams out there, so many great teams that don't get the ring. And, it's just that's sports.
Yep, that's why they call it March Madness, and that's why I think it is the best sporting spectacular in the world. And I know there's probably some Brits in here listening. What about the World Cup? Yeah, right. All right. Watching grown men in shorts and high shin guards run around, and the game's 1-0 after 90 minutes. I can do without that. All right, Bobby. I want to remind everybody they can pick up the Sheridan Report to SheridanReport.com or at Sheridan Report. It's $10 a month or $50 a month, $10 a day. You can parlay that going to MyBookie.ag, clicking on the banner on thegruelingtruth.net, place in a little wager. But if you're a first-time depositor and you go through thegruelingtruth.net, you will get up to a $1,000 cash bonus, up to 50% of your first deposit. So we're going to wrap it up. Me and Bobby will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Hey, Mike, we got a little bit of a no-hitter alert going on. It's the bottom of the fifth, and both pitchers, both Strasburg and Syndergaard, have thrown no-hitters. We're in the bottom of the fifth.
But the Phillies
Nationals have a lead,
but the Nationals have scored? Okay.
They have scored. Yeah, they scored on a sac bunt. Look, I didn't see it, but looked probably a type of a squeeze play early on in the game, in the second inning, and the Mets just got their first hit. So the Mets just got a hit against Strasburg, leading off the bottom of the fifth. So that's done. Now Syndergaard's got a no-hitter through 5, but he's got 87 pitches already, so he won't be able to make the full 9. But anyways, that's
stupid. By the way,
yeah,
he's got a no-hitter. Let him go for the no-hitter.
We can do a show on that one of these days. I've got a lot of thoughts on that. But anyhow, Mike, that's your update, and good luck to everybody. And we got some really, really good stuff coming up. And I'm going to pay attention to your listeners' Milwaukee, Philadelphia thing, and I might tweet something about that later. I'm going to go do some research on that number. And there was no line on that. So when that thing came out this morning at 5, I didn't really look too much into it. I just came onto the show, but I want to maybe look into that a little bit more for him.
All right, guys. So Bob from Scranton, keep an eye out on Twitter. Yep. Real quick, I want to tell everybody tomorrow we'll have our Final Four Spectacular at noon on Survive in Advance, where we will have Lucas Weiss from Rogers Sportsnet, who will be in Minneapolis covering the Final Four. He will be on the show with me and Steve. Also, 1980 national champion Poncho Wright from the Louisville Cardinals. That was Darrell Griffith and Poncho. They beat UCLA and Kiki Vandeweghe 59-55 in the 80 national championship game. So make sure you listen to us tomorrow with Lucas and Poncho. And then, of course, me and Bobby will be on at 2 o'clock Eastern. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Bobby Sheridan, I'm Mike Goodpasser. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.